Testing 1, 2. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Great to have everybody on a beautiful Thursday morning here in San Francisco. My hometown. Happened to grow up in the Sunset District down on 14th Avenue. Went to Sacred Heart downtown here and went to St. Mary's over in the East Bay. So this is a bit of a homecoming. So really appreciate everyone coming out and spending their Thursday with us. So we want to first thank all of our sponsors that have made this No Limits San Francisco event a reality. Very excited to have all of them. A little bit about today's sessions. So we're going to have an amazing lineup of content today. We're going to have leaders from the Gen AI space, from cloud and financial planning organizations. We're going to have some captivating customer stories from our Incorta folks. And we will be having sessions throughout the day. We will have breaks in between. So at 10:45, we'll have a break this morning. At 12:15, we'll be hosting a lunch for everybody. And then at 5:30, we will have a reception following the event. Now, we realize some of you may have things to do during the day, so feel free, if you need to leave, to come back and join us later this afternoon for the reception. We definitely would love to see everybody this evening, get a chance to chat, break bread, and get to know you personally. So looking forward to an amazing day together. So a couple of administrative things. The first, let's make sure that we keep our phones on silent. I knew you just downloaded that new Taylor Swift ringtone, but not for today, all right? We will also, two of our speakers will be having Q&A sessions after the conclusion of their presentation. We will have some folks with microphones walking around to field your questions. So just put your hand up if you have a question, and we'll make sure to come over and facilitate that question for you. As I mentioned, we have one morning break at 10:45. We've got the lunch at 12:15, and then the reception at 7:30, or at 5:30, excuse me. And then most importantly, if you need to be validated, you are smart enough, you're good enough, and you're really better looking than you give yourself credit for. But if you also need continued validation, we will validate your parking out at the registration desk as well. So maybe that's just an Irish thing. I think I need the validation. So we are going to kick off this morning with our keynote speaker. We're going to have Sol Rashidi joining us. Sol was originally going to be joining us in person. Now, unfortunately, we did have a bit of a scheduling snafu, and thank goodness for technology. Sol will be joining us virtually. A little bit about Sol Rashidi. So Sol is an esteemed executive, leader, and influencer within the AI, data, and technology space. Having helped IBM launch Watson in 2011 as one of the earliest world applications of artificial intelligence, she holds has held 4 C-suite positions across Fortune 100 companies. She's implemented 32 large-scale enterprise AI implementations. She's been at the forefront of strategy and deployments for data and AI applications over the last several years. And if her professional experience wasn't impressive enough, Sol has 8 patents and has received numerous industry awards, including the top 100 thought leaders in AI, the Forbes AI Maverick of the 21st century, and top 10 global women in AI and data. Sol is now an advisor, consultant, and fractional CDO and CAIO, helping companies advance their business objectives. And we couldn't be happier to have her with us today as our keynote speaker. So help me welcome this impressive leader to the stage, Sol Rashidi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just a quick thumbs up. Can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. My sincere apologies. I couldn't be there in person. There's always a different impact when you're there in person versus on webinar, but I hope that sloppy seconds doesn't actually take away from some of the lessons learned. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you guys actually just through the industry, through network events, through conferences, but there's many of you that I've not had a chance to meet. So I'm hoping just for some time as a brief introduction, just to build some credibility with you all, because I know that there is no shortage of thought leaders and oddly enough, AI experts in the field, which is still weird. I wouldn't even consider myself one, even though I've been doing deployments from 2011, but there will be a little bit of an introduction. And then I'll be going through just kind of talking about some of the challenges with deploying applied AI, embedded AI, and generative AI, and how the data layers really, really has a fundamental impact. I know that we know that, but I think there's a difference between, and there's a gap between perception and reality and our ability to communicate that difference so that we can narrow the gap and actually be more successful with the deployments that we have in place. But the ultimate goal behind everything is how do we get ourselves out of perpetual POC purgatory? And this goes beyond any of our AI-based projects, but I know we've all had the opportunity of deploying data ecosystems, AI ecosystems, software development projects, digital products, and they haven't gone past the prototyping or the POC phase. And I call that perpetual POC purgatory. And so today we're going to kind of talk about what's stopping us, what's impeding us from pushing things from POC to production. With that said, just a basic background and intro. And again, apologies for this. This is more just to build some credibility with you guys because I've had a chance to review the list of folks that are attending, and you guys are all brilliant in your own rights. And heaven knows that your network is really, really vast. So this is just kind of like, why me? Oddly enough, I played professional sports most of my life. And then as we age, what tends to happen? Recovery takes a little bit longer. And that could mean a good night out, or that could mean we just played some hoops, over the weekend. Things just take a little bit longer to heal. And that's what happened to me. So in my 20s, I played on the US women's national rugby team. And then I decided that it was time to hang the cleats because recovery just took a little bit longer. And the first job I took was the first offer I got, and that was to be a data engineer. So I started out as a practitioner. And back then, 20 plus years ago in the late 90s, early 2000s, a data engineer was a very nebulous role. It was kind of like everything in the kitchen sink. And that was from orchestration to observability to building these platforms and data warehouses and data marts. It wasn't really a concrete role, not the way it is today. And data wasn't nearly as valued, nor was it considered an asset. But interestingly enough, about 6 months into the role, my fellow teammates came back to me and told me that, hey, we love you, but you're never allowed to touch a lick of code again. You do not know how to write production ready code, and you're creating more work for us than you are helping us with the workload. So they assigned me to do something that none of them loved to do, and that was to essentially translate the outputs of the team to the business. And interestingly enough, when I got to meet a few of the directors and VPs, I really loved the business side of things. I loved learning about the P&L, strategic priorities, how they were making decisions, their KPIs. And interestingly enough, I built relationships there. And they're like, we kind of like you. How about from now on, you be our point person? And everything we want, you translate over to your team. And my team on the data engineering side was like, and everything we do, we want you to bring back to the business. And I just went back and forth. At first, I felt a little bit lost because I didn't have a true home or a true tribe. But in that Venn diagram, I did find a home, and I was what I call the glorified translator. And to this day, I still am because I'm a techno-functional leader. But randomly, the career sort of Christmas treed its way up, and I was a SAP Platinum MDM consultant. Then I led the enterprise data management team within IBM. And then when Watson became Jennings in 2011 and IBM decided to take Watson to market, I gracefully begged my boss's boss's boss who went over to join Watson. And I didn't even know how to spell AI. And I was just like, I think you can't do AI without data. And I'm your data gal, so I want in. And after 4 months, I came in. And between 2011 to 2014, 15, during the rise and demise, if you will, I was knee deep in the details, hands-on, doing delivery work because we were forward selling a lot of these capabilities, hoping the technology would catch up. So what I'm about to share with you is a fraction of some of the lessons learned, if you will. But I've been very honored because since then, I've had the role of Chief Data and AI Officer for Royal Caribbean back in 2016, and Sony Music and Merck Pharmaceuticals and Estee Lauder. And as of 11 months ago, I did go independent. I did write a book, but I have the opportunity to work with multiple companies, not just a company. And all this is important just simply to build a relationship and credibility with everyone, because I know you guys have a network of the smartest individuals. We've all seen different versions of this. This is just a brief history of AI. But the key takeaway from this slide is really AI is not new. It's been around for decades. And the commercial applications have actually been around more than 2022 and 2023. But there were these cold periods of time where people didn't want to discuss it. But I do think that, if you think about IBM going public, televised, where IBM's Deep Blue beat Gary in a chess match, and then IBM's Watson beating Ken Jennings in Jeopardy. These were some key moments that led to the phenomenon that we're living in now. And if we take a look at overall, just the history of the consumer products that we absorb, that we play with, that we have access to, some of us are taking it kind of for granted, I would say. But AI-based capabilities is subtly already penetrating our lives because we've exchanged data for convenience. And it's not by accident that when we're on our websites or on our phones, we get recommendations, we get next best action. These things aren't because they magically appeared, but every app that we've downloaded, every product that we've ever bought, Roomba being a perfect example, and this was in the early 2000s, of a commercialized product that embeds sensors, that embeds real-time data analysis to be able to understand how to navigate and roam around the room and actually do a scan of the entire area so we can optimize its areas. And we're like, it's a vacuum. How glamorous can it be? But the amount of sensors and data it processes at a millisecond basis is astounding. And we've taken some of those things for granted. Now, granted, there was Siri and there's Alexa, and we can debate about the effectiveness of either of the products, but they were very early commercial products of that natural language being discussed and translated in near-term results. And so the activity to output ratio of these AI-based capabilities has been with us for several decades. So the question is now that most of us either work for small companies, mid-sized companies, or enterprises, why are we fundamentally having a bit of a challenge in converting from proof of concepts and prototype into production? And here's a fun little stat. We are living in the AI phenomenon right now, and you can't turn the corner without bumping into something that's being called AI or written about AI. But I don't know if you guys know, US actually isn't even on the P curve of AI adoption. China being number one, India being number two, Canada's number three of all things. But take a look at this. And in the large list of deployment rates, just based on global rankings right now, Italy is ahead of us, the United Emirates, Germany, France, Spain. I would never have thought, but we as a country as a whole fundamentally are still struggling, not necessarily with experimentation, not with applied research, not with R&D, and not with prototyping. But the transition between prototyping and production is something that we as a country fundamentally still struggle with. Why? Well, to build the capabilities, we're all very familiar with the fact that we need infrastructure, right? No brainer. We all already know that. We need data. That's a no brainer as well. We already know that. And of course, we need our people, just the talent, the ability to align. All these things are needed to build. But there's a few secret sauces that help us convert build into scaling. And that is the way that we are adapting and evolving our operational models. And that is not something that we're necessarily putting an emphasis on just yet. But the reasons why current generative AI capabilities are still struggling to scale is, if you can believe it or not, only 30% of the challenges are associated with data and infrastructure. 70% of the hurdles that we as a country, we as a society, and I'm sure you guys are individually feeling within your companies, has nothing to do with the tech, has nothing to do with the data or what's available to us. First, it's about aligning the strategies that we choose with existing maturities and cultural tolerance. For example, if you're in healthcare or life sciences or insurance, right? The risk exposure is very minimal, and they are organizations that like to measure 6 times before they cut once. And that naturally creates drag and lag. And not only that, but it creates a ton of cycles around aligning what's our strategy, what's going to be the use cases. That has an impact on our ability to move quickly. The second is right now, we are picking use cases based on business value. And I hate to break your heart, but when it comes to generative AI capabilities and when it comes to new advents, whether it's applied AI, embedded AI, or generative AI, I am not a fan of using business value as the primary marker of using your use case. And here's why. You could be working with a head of manufacturing who has a problem to solve. You could be working with the head of supply chain that has the problem to solve. It could be procurement. It could be finance. It could be product development. It could be R&D. It could be the president of P&L. They fundamentally want to leverage artificial intelligence for a number of reasons to solve their problems. They all have inherent business value. Business value is not the determining factor in helping us succeed in that pivot from prototype to production. When you do something in prototype, it's a very small scale. You can use simulated data, but it's a completely different beast to be able to pivot something into production. And so the framework that I've historically used, because I've made a few mistakes in leveraging business value, is criticality and complexity to deploy. And the measures for criticality are, quite frankly, is there a competitive threat? Are there regulations and fines that we're going to be exposed to? Is the market consolidating? Like, these things need to be asked first before we get into the inherent business value and the capacity and the effectiveness and the productivity gains that we're going to have. And then assessing your ability to deploy, the complexity to deploy, because many organizations have not invested in the fundamentals. And so the last thing you want to do is choose a business case where the fundamentals aren't in place. So you have to put 9 months of effort to be able to put in the necessary data ecosystem so that you can actually even get going on the use case in and of itself. So selecting the right use case really, really matters. The third aspect of it is actually clarity in the division of labor. In a world where we have CTOs, CIOs, CDOs, CAOs, CAIOs, where does one role start? Where does another end? Who ultimately has accountability to be able to drive this forward? Because with AI-based capabilities, and it doesn't matter, again, if it's applied, embedded, or generative AI, fundamentally, you have a dependency on data, infrastructure, and individuals from multiple departments, teams, and functions who already have a full plate. So making sure you have a leader with a single accountability and ownership to drive this agenda forward is super key. And a lot of organizations, because we're very much matrix oriented and we are a collaborative and a democratic society, sometimes we have a hard time of identifying a lead. And then making the hard decisions, because even if you were to build the most amazing prototype, what has to happen when you need to operationalize it? Roles change, structures change, the way we do things have to change, and companies are so busy focused on building these capabilities, they're not necessarily looking around the corner of what needs to change within our existing organizational and operational model to operationalize these capabilities after they've been built, and then evolving the culture around it. And these 5 things, and even though we didn't go necessarily completely in depth, are really 70% of the challenges that we need to overcome in order to pivot from prototype to production, with data and infrastructure being about 30% of it. But let's break down that 30%. Most of us know this already, so forgive me if this is a review or if it's a summary, but yes, the quality of our outputs depends on the quality of our inputs. We 100% know this. Now, I've never been in an organization in my prior roles where data has been amazing. Even after I've fixed, right, the issues, has data been amazing. You can never expect, and we will never live in a utopic world where data is completely clean and everything's kosher. At the end of the day, you have to go through the effort and classify and tag your information. And what I call it is a tier-based tagging of good enough, okay-ish, and it's spotty. So when it's time to select your use cases, and after you've tagged the data domains, you can't pick the ones where data is spotty or okay-ish. At best, at minimum, you have to go with data classifications that are good-ish. And of course, there's data transparency. We need to understand the lineage. And if we have cataloging in place, where did it come from? Where was it transformed? Why is it showing up in the way it's showing up? Because inevitably, the question is going to be asked about accuracy. And unless you have transparency in place, you're not going to be able to understand why something is inaccurate or of low hygiene. Now, accessibility is obviously key for generative AI capabilities. You're only as good as your last data set. So if you're in a situation where you're running your prototype, where you grab a data file, and it's a large enough data set for the prototype, but when you push something in production, you can't operate in flat files or batch jobs or monthly updates. At a minimum, you need to be able to develop an ecosystem where data accessibility is near real time, because you're only as good as your last data set. And that's a nuance that matters with applications and deployments around AI. DevOps is great, but even within your classic DevOps infrastructure and processes in place, Unlike software development, where if you write production-ready code, you containerize that code and you push it to production, that code remains static. And that feature, that button, that report will continue to live on as long as that code base in production lives on. That's not how it works with ML ops, and that's not how it works with the AI DevOps, because you need this live wire, this live circuit to continually run through. So making sure that you have an ecosystem that allows for accessibility as near real time as possible is super key. We all talk about, of course, next is privacy and security and leakage. I call these the what if scenarios. But the analogy I've always given is, what if I cross the street and get hit by a bus? What if I take a flight and I don't hit I don't get to my destination? Yes, there are concerns around leakage, especially around personal information, proprietary information, but there are so many solutions out there, both within managed services, both within, even within, just as an example, classic mechanisms like data encryption, where we're taking data from the source, migrating it to the target, we encrypt it in transit at rest, we de-encrypt it before it hits target. Now, encryption is a method for us, especially with generative AI-based capabilities, but unfortunately, it's not comprehensive enough. But the way we've been solving for, and it exists since the Watson days, data security, data leakage, and those what-if scenarios is leveraging stochastic modeling and masking, where data is quote unquote masked in AI applications. We don't call it encrypted, but it doesn't need to be unmasked when it gets into the foundational or the machine learning models to be able to train it. The models actually can read the data set as it's intended in plain text while it's being masked. So we shouldn't use these as an excuse for not going forward, because there are many, many solutions out there that we can leverage. We just have to do the research. And then, of course, the fifth one is really around our systems and platforms being able to handle the proliferation of data that's coming at us at all angles. It's interesting that sometimes I still hear businesses say, well, we need more data. We need more insights. When in actuality, it's not about collecting more data, but it's about connecting and stitching together the data we already collect. And do we have the systems and platforms to be able to support that volume and that velocity and that variety that's coming in towards us? So when you're looking at deploying, or if you're in the midst, or if you're prototyping in its most basic forms, there are 4 layers. There are 4 foundational layers in creating generative AI capabilities. But supporting these 4 foundational layers are 10 foundational layers of data. You guys, I'm sure, have seen this in many different forms or whatnot, so forgive me again if this is just a summary, but I want to make sure that this is comprehensive and everyone walks away with, these are the 10 foundational layers supporting any generative AI capability. Our collection and acquisition of information, where we store this information, our ability to annotate and label. And we tend to bypass, short circuit, or shortcut this. But labeling data, and I'm going to point out number 3, is essential for supervised learning tasks within generative AI. It is one of the key foundations necessary for being able to develop truth and accuracy within our model training. Of course, there's integration and unification. So when you're training these foundational models, yes, there's a theory of more data is better. But again, it's not about just dumping a bunch of data in there. It's really about combining the data sources into a unified data set. So if you already don't have a robust enough semantic layer or even a conform layer, this is something that should be done before you start model training, fine tuning, or even going through the RAG process, because this will increase the training and performance. Then, of course, there's the pre-processing and the logical layers, and this is where all your transformations and pre-processing occurs, so that data is in the most suitable format to start training your models. So you'll notice I'm using different language, even though the principles and the fundamentals are the same from other prior projects that we've led holistically. And then if we get into the next 5, of course, the cleaning and the deduping, we're only as good as our last data sets. That one's obvious. The governance. But in this case, the governance takes a slightly different lens. It is around the usability of it and rules and protocols of who can have access to it and who can't for the various AI initiatives that are going on across different businesses. What's the protocol? What's the manifesto? How are we to leverage Perplexity or generative AI or some of the, ChatGPT and some of the other capabilities that we have access to us? 8, accessibility and availability. This sounds simple in nature, but in the 4 prior post CDO, CAO, CDAO posts I've ever had. This was probably the most time-consuming and the longest pole in the tent. And let me just give you an example. One of my very, very first deployments had dependency on a data set that was, quite frankly, owned by research and development. And it highlighted, and there was proprietary information, right? There were some key ingredients. And so we needed this data set to be able to develop the knowledge store. And what was happening is we were developing the knowledge store for our customer support team. Because what was happening is we had about 80,000 active product SKUs, and it was impossible for the customer support team to remember all the data elements, metadata, and just facts and figures around the 80,000 products. So the goal is how do we build this knowledge store so that if it's a question they can't answer because they didn't memorize it or they haven't been with the organization long enough, how do they type the question in of like, which one of our products are vegan? Or which one of our products have vitamin C as a primary ingredient? And this project was for my very, very first retail and CPG client. This was in 2012. Well, R&D was very hesitant to give us this data set. And I said, okay, well, what are we hesitant about it? Because we have a clear use case that has a dependency on this domain set. Long story short, they were tagging it as very sensitive data that was confidential. And I said, well, it could be sensitive and confidential, but we list the ingredients on our websites. So why is it public information on our websites, but yet it's confidential for us to be able to use it internally to be able to support our customer support team? And I did a one-for-one comparison of the data they didn't want to give to us and the data that was publicly available. And I'm like, why are we locking the keys for us to build a capability that could really benefit not only our customer support team, but improve the NPS scores of our call center? But we're able to make it available externally. It just didn't align. This kicked off a data accessibility and an availability project. And what we had to do was we ultimately said, well, that doesn't make sense. And I convinced enough leaders. So we went through multiple data domains, and then within the data domains, multiple data sets. We had to categorically go through and classify them as data that's externally available, so it should be available to everyone internally, data that should be internally available, but not externally available, what's considered sensitive, confidential, and classified. Now, if you were a data scientist or if you had a special use case that you wanted to deploy, if it was sensitive or confidential or classified, it was use case based approve. But we'd also gone through and aligned our identity access management protocols within our cloud ops to users within Active Directory. So we went through the process, and I had to work with HR very closely, with our CISO very closely, with our CIO very closely of classifying the data, identifying internal individuals within the DNA field, and then tag them based on their user rights so they could get accessible and available data without having to constantly ask for permission. Because there was no way for us to scale these great capabilities that we were developing in production without this in place. Something so simple that you're seeing as a column with a label 8 took us 14 months to do within this enterprise. And this is why it's foundational, because if you don't go through this, everything has to be permission-based, and there's always going to be a bit of a struggle. Then, of course, you guys are aware of monitoring and maintenance, because when you push data into production, you're only as good as your last data set. So you have to be very, very on top of the fact that there are no failures in the logs. There are no jobs that failed. This live wire is key for us to keep. So the uptime is super critical. That's why monitoring and maintenance becomes imperative. And then, of course, we're all very familiar with privacy and security. Now, we have already spent quite a bit of time on accessibility and availability, just to give you an example of what it took to do something. But what I wanted to do is actually shed some light in some other areas. The fresher the data, the better the outputs. You're only as good as your last data set. And that's why it's really critical of going through the exercise and making sure that your data is live, regardless of what model you're feeding and regardless of what you push into production. I think the other lesson learned over the 14 years of deployments is generative AI just doesn't do well with summarized or aggregated data sets. You actually need the details and the metadata when you're training these foundational models, these machine learning models. It actually prefers the details. So try and avoid pulling things from the semantic layer that's been overly generalized. If the detailed data is available and your data architecture pulls from conform or even the raw data source. You do need to be aware of all costs and all forms. I was recently helping a client that was really, really happy that they had generated about an extra $600 million in top line growth. Sorry, not 600 million, forgive me, $600,000 in top line growth, just from like a simple A/B testing that they had done. And they were very, very ecstatic. And I didn't mean to be Debbie Downer, but the first question I asked is, okay, well, how much was the cost of running these workloads that generated $600,000? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, what's the cost associated with it? And, depending on, and it doesn't matter what cloud infrastructure you're on, they do not make it easy. And you have to go through the exercise of combining 20 plus SKUs so you can get an indication of what your workload costs are, storage costs, egress costs, computational costs, licenses, tokens. I encourage everyone, whatever it takes, have line of sight and put in the effort to know how much things cost, because they had actually spent $2.6 million to generate $600,000 in revenue. And obviously the ROI isn't in there. So if you have the optionality of working with partners, vendors, tools, applications, and systems where they are very transparent about your cost, it is in your best interest to do so. I think another lesson to learn also is a private model does help with accelerating POCs. So instead of bringing data to your AI model in a basic infrastructure schema, bringing AI to your data while maintaining a row-level security and access for every user that's going to be leveraging the capability. And then I would say, lastly, for most organizations, due to existing maturity levels and limitations with headcount and funding, it's really difficult for us to build a Frankenstein, right? So taking all these native components and stitching things together, bits and bytes and pieces. We don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the capacity. We're all learning and earning at the same time. So I would say another key takeaway from this is whenever possible, at first, one, there's the buy versus build. Try and buy for your prototypes because someone else has solved the problem for you. And if possible, leverage managed services at first until you develop the inherent muscles internally before you go away from managed services. These things will fundamentally help you push things along and help with the pivot of going from prototype to production. Now, with that said, thank you so, so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We are going to open to a little bit of Q&A, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but if there are questions, I would love to take them at this point in time. Thank you. Now, forgive me, I can't hear too well. So I'm sure you guys can hear me, but I can't hear anything coming from the other end. So if there's a microphone, that could potentially help.
Hi, Sol. You mentioned you're only as good as your last data set. What would be maybe some of the negative outcomes of deploying AI on stale or not near real-time data?
That's a great question, and it's probably a good idea for me to clarify. I would stray us away from live data or real-time data, because the problem is with live or real-time data, there are a lot of anomalies, there are a lot of noise, and there's a lot of trash that comes in. So you do need that time to be able to sift through, gut check, have a human in the loop to make sure that at a minimum it passes your, what I call the threshold acceptability check. So I wouldn't say live data, meaning milliseconds, as it's being produced from your e-commerce engine or your website, feeding it into the capability. But I also would not build a capability based on data that is a month old, right? That is considered stale. So month is stale, real time, like milliseconds, is not good because it hasn't gone through that feedback loop and it hasn't gone through that threshold of acceptability. I would say the sweet spot is within a week's time frame, because that way it's fresh information, but it's gone through the checks and balances internally as an organization to say that we've removed the anomalies, we've removed the noise, We've gone through our cleansing factory, so any weird characters, null values, we've been able to address and treat. Now that information is ready to go for the generative AI capabilities you're developing. But very little, especially within enterprise or mid-sized markets, does it really require millisecond-based live data. I would actually wait a day, even up to a week maximum, to make sure that it goes through the hygiene checks before it feeds the models. So a month is overly stale, and live is dangerous in my opinion. So I would go with a sweet spot of 1 day to a week.
Sol, just pulling you back to the avoiding the business value. You shared that the infrastructure is not in place, so that's why it takes 9 months to build a user case. How can organizations speed up that process to build a user case? Because 9 months sounded very specific.
Yeah, and it was because of a heartburn and experience I'd gone through. We had selected a use case that had tremendous business value, and we were all very excited to get ready with the work, only to find out that the data set was in the okay-ish versus spotty hygiene. The infrastructure couldn't handle the load of near real time. We didn't have enough people in cloud ops or InfoSec to be able to support us with security protocols. And so the company as a whole had not invested in the fundamentals and the foundation, part of those 10 that we just highlighted. And there was an element of catch up. So I had to spend 6 to 9 months building what we needed in place in partnership with the CIO and in partnership with the CISO, so that ultimately we could get to actually training the models and generating them, building the capabilities, and then going live. And so that's why, as part of the use case selection, I get very wary when people pick things based on business value, because business value has no direct correlation or causation with your ability to deploy successfully. So select use cases that, yes, have business value, but your ability to deploy is probably the number one factor in all of this. And your ability to deploy successfully depends on, one, your stakeholder, meaning, do you have a good partner? Are they going to be engaged? Are they going to carve time out of their calendar to meet with you every single 2 weeks? Because you're going to go through and discuss project updates and risks and decisions. You need a good partner. 2, the data set availability and the hygiene, of course, we've all talked about it. That's super critical. Don't pick something that isn't accessible and you're going to have to feed flat files, something that you can connect to, and there's been permission to be able to connect to it in a quote unquote live manner. 3, dependency on other groups. Does this use case, are you able to deploy on your own within your team, or do you have dependencies on other functional groups? Because right now companies are facing the challenge of there's so many strategic priorities that AI has now become another added one on the plate without removing anything else from the strategic priority plate. And as you guys all know, 20% of the workforce are usually the ones getting caught and stuck in every single strategic priority project. So if you have a dependency on people who are already busy, getting time on their calendar, reminding them why we actually need their help. And these could be knowledge workers. These could be those with institutional knowledge where things haven't been documented. They could be just the office of the PMO, it's super busy, or the same 3 people within cloud ops that are getting hit from so many different angles. If the more you have to depend on other groups and individuals and functions, the more that project increases drag and lag. And then when it comes to budget and funding, you should never price cost something just for the POC. Do the full end-to-end life cycle, because what ends up happening is other shiny objects hit your plate, and then or strategic priorities could shift, and something that you worked so hard to build within prototype doesn't have enough funding to go into production. Or worse, whatever you've built in prototype, they are treating as something in production. And now you have to maintain something that was put together with like popsicle sticks and glue. So the idea is that the complexity to deploy your use case is a determining factor of which use case to prioritize, because the perception will be developed of something being successful or not in your ability to do it quickly.
Thank you, Sol. We're going to offer a big round of applause for Sol. Our next speaker is the co-founder and the CEO of Incorta. Osama El-Kadi has been in the software development space for over 25 years. Prior to starting Incorta, Osama was the VP of applications at Oracle. He spent 2 decades developing and bringing to market applications for Oracle. He is also a multiple patent holder related to data management, and he has invented new approaches to both mobile strategy and information discovery. So we are very happy to have our CEO and co-founder, Osama El-Kadi.
I don't need it. I think I have the more advanced technology. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for coming and joining us today. We are so excited having all of you here. We have been working on so many innovative and exciting technology that we would love to share with you. And we have so many partners with us today that will also help us with our journey. So next, please. Do I have like, what is the next? So what is the green button? Okay. So here we go. First of all, I want to thank all of our partners who've been a very important part of our journey all the way here, and also who will take us forward. We cannot thank our partners enough. They are the main reason for our success with our customers. So we really, really appreciate being with us. Second, I also would like to thank all of our customers who are here or who are listening online. We have a lot of people also on Zoom and on social media. So thanks a lot for being with us, and helping us innovate and push us to keep innovating to help you advance your business as well. So starting with the operational lakehouse, why did we invent Incorta? What was the reason we did that? We looked originally that the traditional data pipeline is a lot of work to get data in, a lot of work it takes a very long time, and how can we simplify that process? So the reason we invented Incorta, and for many, many of our customers know, is how can we get direct access from source all the way to destination? How can we simplify this whole process of requiring so many steps and so many systems and so many talented teams to get data from start to end? We just heard from Saul how difficult it is to do all these data lineage and how can we trust the data, all of that stuff. That's the reason we invented Incorta, to accelerate getting data from. So is somebody listening to, I don't know. I'm hearing something, my delay in the back. But we actually, the whole thing about Incorta is how can we simplify the process of getting data from source to target, and also feed your existing systems with live updates. I know that so many people around the world don't even think this live update is possible, but we have customers running with 5 minutes update. And these 5 updates here is to feed the business users or to feed the data warehouse. We're not talking about feeding the GenAI models yet. But business users without all this live data, 5-minute data, they cannot trust it. They cannot build the right decisions if they are working on few hours old data. In few hours, so many things can change, and that disrupt the business a lot. So not only that, we also build this marketplace that has so many pre-built applications with our partners, and how can we accelerate the deployment and accelerate getting data in the hands of our business users. So this marketplace hundreds and thousands of business users around the world are using all these applications that built with us or by our customers and our partners. And these are the results. We are so happy every time, and you will hear today from our customers about their success stories. We don't hear customers say, yeah, we deployed Incorta and it's running fine. They are so excited about what are the changes in the business that Incorta made to them. And that's our focus all the time. We don't ask customers, are you getting your reports on time? We ask our customers, what are the changes that Incorta made to your business? Because that's what technology should be for. We should add and spend on technology to improve and accelerate our business. And every customer we have, they are talking about the millions of dollars they save or how they will be able to advance their business and be more and more productive and competitive in the market. Like Broadcom. I keep talking about Broadcom because we're so happy that Broadcom just 2-3 months ago decided that with all this VMware integration, they're gonna standardize 100% on Incorta. So they have 90 developers from Deloitte migrating from the remaining any other technology to have Incorta as the main and unified technology across the enterprise. It's now $650 billion company with almost 70 million in revenue, and they depend on one data platform. And there is a reason for that, because that platform helped them go from 20 billion in market cap to 600 billion in market cap. And you can go to Broadcom CIO, CEO, and Broadcom CIO will be with us later today to talk about their journey with Incorta and how we were able to help them have every discussion with every level in the organization with real data, with real numbers, and with real and almost near real time. And we have many of our customers, international customers, also talking about how the SAP data, even looking at the SAP data and looking at the reports, is not as fast as going to Incorta itself and being able to accelerate their business and save a lot on the waste and save a lot on the things that they couldn't avoid before. Like what I hear, saving 50% of food waste is very important with us. And the same with many of our customers in that space. Again, access to real-time data and how easy it is to access and operationalize that in an operational lake house that help them do this. Okay? So now what we have been doing to the data space, simplifying and accelerating and making it so easy for business to access data, we are trying to do the same for GenAI. And doing that for GenAI, we realized we cannot do that our own. We looked at what are the challenges that our customers facing to use GenAI. Everyone is so excited about GenAI. Every time I meet with any of our customers or prospects, they talk about, we are looking into GenAI. We would love, like people are so excited about ChatGPT. People see how ChatGPT is really helping even their kids do their homework faster and accelerate a lot of things. People just ask questions and get very amazing answers, as if like somebody in your brain like can tell you exactly something that you never thought possible. But when it comes to business challenge is, until today, and this is with Gartner, they say only 5% of business are able to utilize GenAI. So we looked at that. We say, why only 5%? And we ask our customers. So number one is lack of data. So yeah, we understand that, because definitely, as Saul was saying, you cannot depend on aggregated data and summarized data. And this is what business been running with. When you have a data warehouse, that's all what you have in your data warehouse. After all the ETL process, after all this work, you end up having just some numbers, aggregated, summarized number. You cannot use that to train your GenAI model, your LLMs and so on. You cannot use it for that. So, and even business struggling to get to details. That's why the operational lakehouse was invented. But also difficult to deploy. And we experience that ourselves. When we get our engineers to say, we need to deploy some models, it's even very hard. So how about business that don't have that skills? Lack of security is a very, very fundamental thing that preventing customers from doing that, and uncontrolled cost. And you will see why this is very challenging one by one. So imagine if you have this fantastic electric car, but you're somewhere or at home, but you don't have a charger. So you bought this very, very fancy car, but you don't have a charger for it. You cannot use it. You just keep it in the box all the time. If you don't have data, you can just invest on GenAI and you can invest on a lot of infrastructure. It will be just sitting there and you cannot do anything with it. And you will feel really bad at that time. And difficult to deploy. It's not an easy job. I can tell you, if you go to, by the way, there are some companies trying to help a lot of business, like you go to Databricks website, and they'll tell you, yeah, these are the steps, and these are the tools, and these are the technology that engineers will need one by one to be able to get to something like that. You can spend the time to just read the steps, and it takes weeks and months for one deployment to happen. Because you need to do some data collections, you need to move the data to the model, you need to read the model, you need to user access them, you need to deploy it, you need to validate, you need to maintain it going forward. So it's every time every business look at that, even large businesses, they look at this and say, where are the resources who can do this to us? Lack of security. There are so many LLM models. If you put in the hands of business, what are they going to do with it? And how are you going to handle the access control? And what you don't know, who's going to be able now to attack your business? The hackers are getting smarter and smarter every day. And you have no idea what will happen to your data if you get to some of these rack systems. Okay. Then uncontrolled cost. This is a quote, by the way, from LinkedIn. May was saying that she just talked to some Fortune 10 company, and they told her they spend $3 million a month. Just, you see the excitement. People are willing to spend $3 million a month. $3 million a month. And they are not getting even one use case. With all this spending, people are so crazy and throwing so much money, but they have nothing at the end, literally. And you can validate that talking to so many businesses. That's the reason we came up with this Incorta Nexus. And it is the first operational GenAI. I know it's like a dream. When I talked about that, even to our internal teams, everybody told me you're crazy, as usual. And that will never be possible. And you need this and that. I say, you know what? We will not do that our own. We will have to do that with partners to help us. So what is the basic idea of Nexus? Nexus is the way to, I'm not sure if you guys can see the screen from the bottom. Okay. There are so many, you have your operational data. I can see it, by the way, and I can tell you what's there. You have all your operational data. The screen should have been up a little bit. You have all your operational data with Incorta Operational Lakehouse. How can we get Nexus to simplify bringing all this technology to your data? We don't want you to take your data somewhere. We want to bring the technology all the way to you. I want to get the latest technology to you. So we cannot do that without some of the very innovative and advanced technology partners in this area, Victara and Explain. It is called Explain, not AI Explain, please. The CEO is here and he always insists it's Explain, okay? So having Explain and having Victara, Explain helped us a lot in the deployment, in the fine-tuning, in accessing all these models. I want to tell you that our teams are testing these models all the time. there are models that comes out every day, and we keep testing them, and we see which one is better for which use cases. Without Explain, we would never be able to do that. We couldn't even deploy one model. But with Explain as part of Nexus, now our customers can access all these models when it comes to whether GenAI models, LLM, or AI models. That is a breakthrough for us. And the other thing also, we understand that GenAI requirement is not just about the structured data we have with Incorta. We also needed all this unstructured data out there within the company or outside. How can we bring all of this so we can make meaningful use cases? Because honestly speaking, 80% of how you make GenAI really successful if you combine unstructured data with structured data. So here came Vectara, and again, another amazing partner that integrating Vectara with Incorta, within Nexus, and with Explain, we get the enterprise RAG system, and we get the fine-tuning and the serving model from Explain. Because we really want to make something really special for you. We want to make something that when you use it, you feel it's private, it's secure, and actually the accuracy for your business is much better than any other model that you can do from out there. And one more thing, also we have been working also with Gemini. Gemini, I've been working very closely with them, and they also been very, very close working with us. And Gemini also is part of Nexus with us. We are giving our customers also access to Gemini. And working with Google and working very closely with the Google team is allowing us and allowing our customers also to do things that they cannot do without that huge infrastructure. Gemini came, I know that a lot of people tested Gemini in the early days, and it was not as good as ChatGPT, but it came long way, and it's actually getting not just closed, it's advancing in so many areas that even OpenAI is not there. So this is the experience or the new experience our customers will have. And you will just see something that I know for many people, they think, so what? But if people been trying to test a data model or test LLM before, they know that value. So now you have the data studio. You are able to connect the data, you do data quality, you do profiling, you do all of that. And then here you want to use one of these models to do something for you. And we added a new recipe called LLM. And the LLM recipe will allow you to look at the data, you do your prompting, and access as many LLM models available for the business from just one window. Compare that to if you want to use any other system, how many you have to deploy the model, test, and then deploy the model again and test. Here you have access to Gemini, you have access to Llama 3, you have access to Mistral, you have access to anything. All the approved LLMs that your business can access will be there, and many of them will be also served from Explain. So having access to all these LLM models on Explain and allowing you to be able to select a model and test, then select another model and test just from within here. And this is all, by the way, with sampling data. Behind the scene, the moment you click OK, then all the billions and billions of records will be fed to the model, and you will be able to utilize the model to take data to the next step. So the business will be able, the developers will be able to do all of that without having to worry at all about the infrastructure or how the deployment works. That's, I really believe it's a breakthrough when it comes to accessing to GenAI. So this is for business. And how about for developers? For business users. So Nexus Copilot is to accelerate everyday task. The Copilot, you will see that on Incorta pages, but also if you go to your e-business suite or your SAP, Windows, or your Salesforce, or any application, as long as the data is in Incorta, you will be able to have, like, eventually, very soon actually, a plugin that will say Nexus Copilot. You click on it, and then it will show the same window. Well, that the left part of it can be any of your application. You can ask questions, and you get answers to that. And we will see in the demo very soon, by the way, how we are taking the operation much, much further with accessing to data within Incorta, data within the organization, and data outside, in the outside world. Nexus Copilot will be available for all the time, for all your business users, in any task they are doing. And that's the promise of how we are simplifying this, and all this infrastructure running behind the scene, we are taking care of that for you. So that's why we call it the operational GenAI. One more thing, we just got that patent filed yesterday at the patent office. So what's so cool and what's so innovative also about Nexus Copilot is with every question the business is asking, actually Nexus is accessing multiple LLMs to answer one question. It breaks the question into pieces and takes each piece to a different LLM to get the most accurate and efficient answer to you, and then bring you back the result set here. It's so cool and so impressive. And when you see the demo with, what's your name? Rob. Rob, right? And Stephen, you will see how cool it is and what the word of, because by the way, Rob is our CFO, and I told him you'll be able to use Nexus. He said, what do you mean by Nexus? Like, I haven't heard about that. And he told, you will see it. So I want you to see how Nexus will make Rob's business much, much cooler from now on, right? I hope you enjoy working with Incorta even more. Okay, so, and that's Incorta Nexus. Live detailed data that you can actually, if people even don't think that feeding business, the model with live data, we want to make that possible. Fixed cost. For the first time ever, the enterprise will know that I'm using GenAI and I don't have to have any surprises. It's not token based, it's not per hour. You know exactly your fixed cost per year or per month, and you know that there are no surprises at all. And without that, you'll not be able to open Copilot to all your data and all your business. Because people are so careful about accessing, doing anything, it's going to be very costly. And then it's fully managed. You don't have to worry about anything. Everything is managed behind the scene for you. Your developers need to focus on the business cases, and your users should be just enjoying it in every task they do. And it's private. You're the only one, these servers, you are the only one using them. The fine-tuning, the RAG, the usage, no one else is able to access your models. That's why we avoid any security breach from there. So no one will have access to that. Not only that, every question asked there, it goes through so many layers, especially through our semantic layer and so on, to also give the business the answer with raw level data access. Later on today, the team will talk about Incorta X, and we'll talk about all the Nexus use cases within Incorta X as well. And you'll see how you can open HR data to the entire business, which a lot of businesses say, oh, we cannot have HR data for everyone. Incorta knows exactly each manager, how many employees they have, and gives them the answer only based on their organization. Okay? So Nexus demo. I would like to have Rob, the guy who's always back in the front of the stage, okay, and Stephen to come here and tell us what would be the experience of a CFO when they want to find something that they couldn't find before, or a whole new thing. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Osama.
Thank you. All right, we're really excited to do the first demo of Incorta Nexus and our operational GenAI. This demo is going to be through the lens of a CFO. Thus, we put our CFO on the spot here to ask some questions.
And I am not an AI expert.
Yeah.
I'll give you my opinion.
And this is the first time, by the way, Rob, on the stage to give any demo.
Yeah.
On this particular stage.
Yeah. So we're going to do it through the lens of a CFO, digging into a key metric around profitability margin. We thought that should be relevant for almost any company, any board that's looking at this. All right, so for this, we're gonna ask it a simple question to get started about this key metric, our profitability margin. So we're gonna go ahead and start with a question around our operating income margin for the last 2 years and see what we can come back with. So as we type this in, right, the main benefit that we'll see is that we're bringing AI to your live, detailed operational data, right? Rather than taking your data there. And then, so this question will go through and scour every single operational system, every transaction item to give us an answer. So here we go. We see with one question, we not only have the data, it's calculated in the metric we want, and it's charted, right? With one simple contextual question. And then simply we can, with one click, add this to our dashboard and save us a good amount of time. But like any good CFO, right, we want a little bit of context. We saw that our margin actually decreased from 8% to 4%. I want to know, is that an us issue? Is that a market issue? So the second power of Incorta's Nexus is that we can marry our internal enterprise data with external unstructured data. So I'm going to actually try and find context to see if competitors are feeling this same pain. So we've loaded 10Ks and 10Qs for a competitor, thousands of pages, and with a simple question, we can now go find out what our competitors' operating income margin is too, so we can compare it. So we're going to ask this question, and now it's going to actually, what it does is scours all those thousands of pages, all the unstructured data, and will give us an answer here. Perfect. So here we go. We have an answer. They actually had a similar use case where they went from 10% down to 5%. So maybe it's a market dynamic, but I'm going to pause the demo here, and I'm going to put our CFO on the spot now. So how would you go about this normally, trying to find competitor information, and how much time would it save you to simply ask native and Incorta for the metrics?
So the answer is it depends. If you're a private company, you're scouring the internet, you're looking for PDFs, presentations, things of that nature, and it's largely going to be unstructured data. If it is a public company, you do have the benefit of all the Ks and Qs that are out there floating on Edgar and what else. And typically you're going to have an IR team that could be anywhere from 2 to 15 people that they are compiling all that information, aggregating it together. And especially as a public company, that CFO, they've got earnings calls, they're building out war rooms with binders of all the competitive information, trying to anticipate every question an investor or analyst could be asking. So that could be tens of hundreds of hours in preparation just for one phone call. And a lot of it is understanding the competitive intelligence of, how you compare this company to something else. So it's a massive undertaking, and just being able to take, I'm a finance guy. I love numbers and 10 Qs and Ks. It's dry reading, and to be able to take that, dump it into a model, and say this is exactly what happened. That is really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually in a previous life in banking written filings and S1s, and it still is tedious, even when you write it and actually create the filing yourself. So, so here, if you saw this, what would be your next question? If you saw our competitor, they went from 10% to 5% in their operating income margin, what would you want to know?
It's going to be your typical variance analysis. You're going to want to double click and understand, is it something in cost of goods sold, or is it something below the gross margin line in your operating expenses? But you need to double click and understand the context of, is this a trend? Is it a one-time event? What is the prime mover? Because again, in finance, you're always trying to double click and getting into the lower level of detail to understand, what the transaction or what the movement in the accounts is.
So it's not like a known dashboard. It's all these ad hoc questions that you might have.
Exactly.
So let's go ahead and start the demo again. And let's dig into this. But before, this is a lot of text. So let's simply ask it to chart our competitor's margin against ours. So we can simply have it for reference as we continue. All right. So as it comes up with a chart there, we'll add it to our dashboard. And as a business user, right, I don't have to create any code, do anything. It's a simple question and click. So now, as Rob said, let's find out why our competitor went from 10% to 5% margin. Maybe this is a market dynamic that's causing our margin to decrease as well. I need this context, right, to go to our CEO that's asking me all these questions or our board to let them know. All right, it looks like there was I'll read this for you, an expense, a $2 billion charge related to agreement in principle. I have no clue what their agreement in principle is. I don't want to read what it is, so I'm simply going to ask a question to have it tell me what that means. And again, it's scouring through all these documents for us. And here it says, it reached an agreement in principle with the EPA and other orgs to resolve regulatory issues, emissions issues, and even had to have a recall. Okay, that's interesting. Let's pause the demo here and put our CFO on the spot again. So what would this tell you about them? So they had this $2 billion charge, which caused their margin to be cut in half. If you're looking at this as a CFO, what would this tell you about that decrease in their margin?
So now this gets to the heart of like what FP&A and IR people do. Looking at that, and this is of course a bit of a simplified example, but if you have that $2 billion charge and you see that decline in your operating margin over time, that tells you it's got to be a one-time event. So with that, you know that there's got to be some kind of either margin compression in your cost of goods sold or some kind of other massive expense in your operating expenses.
Yeah.
And these are the kind of questions that typically your FP&A team, they're responding to and could take 15 minutes to hours to come back to you.
Yeah.
in a complex question.
And this is great context because I could have just looked at our competitor's margin and then gone to my CEO and said, hey, Osama, our margin decreased, but so did everyone else's. It's a market issue. But then when we dug in, what would have taken us hours to comb through all these documents, we found, no, this is a one-time event. It's not going to continue. It wasn't margin compression, right? For their normal business, their margin stayed the same. So let's go ahead and continue the demo. But I want to make sure that nothing else changed, right? As any good CFO, I want some more context. So I'm going to see, it looks like all the margin compression was due to the one-time event. Let's dig into other expenses, see if there's any other fluctuations. So I'm going to ask a question to see on their, let's see if anything on the OpEx fluctuated, any changes in expenses there. And we can see to make sure we cover all our bases. So here we go. We'll ask about OpEx expenses for the last 2 years. And here we go, SG&A as a percent of sales. So not only did it retrieve the data, it did math for us too, was 9.8%. This year, 9.6% last year. Very consistent. R&D as a percent of sales was 4.4 this year, 4.6 last year. So definitely that was not causing any margin compression in their OpEx. Again, I want to cover my bases, so I might go to COGS and gross margin to make sure I have all the information when I go to the board and let them know what's going on. So let's ask them about the COGS and gross margin. Wow, and we see again, their gross margin was 23.9% this year and 24.2% last year. So they had almost no change in any of their OpEx or COGS. All this compression was due to one expense, one-time thing that we could have missed completely if we didn't have this context and just said, it's a market dynamic, let's forgive ourselves for this, for our margin decrease. So let's pause it here. Well, actually, sorry, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
But that there tells you, okay, it isn't a market condition. We need to double click and look in our own books and records and understand why it is we're experiencing this level of margin compression.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly where we're going next. So I'm glad we put you on the spot. So we're going to go in and dig into ours now and say, why did ours decrease then? So we can ask the same question we asked for external data, but just point it towards our data. And we can see it brought back all these same expenses, right? Our COGS expense, our gross margin, SG&A, and R&D. And we see here one glaring issue. Our gross margin went from 21% to 18%. So it was already below our competitor's 24%, and it decreased even further. That's a big discrepancy. We saw a little bit of an increase in SG&A, but it's still around 10%. It's in the right ballpark, right? And so this main issue is not only masking maybe some efficiency gains over here, but it's causing a compression in our profitability. So Like Rob or any good CFO, we want to ask more questions. Why did our gross margin decrease, right? And that's the power of Incorta, is you have access to all this detailed transaction level data. So if I ask this, like, why did it decrease? Very simple question. It's going to come through all of our operating systems now, not just the external, but go through our operating systems. And a look at new, it brought back every single line item in COGS, compensation, material, and freight. And it put it as a percent of sales, which is great. I think we asked it for that. So we can see year over year, our compensation as a percent of sales went from 24 to 31%. A massive increase. That's probably the main issue. It actually looks like we had some efficiency gains in materials and freight. But this increase was so much that it masked those. It caused the decrease in our gross margin and eventually a decrease in the operating margin that my board member is going to ask me about in our next board meeting, or Osama's going to ask me about. And that's the power of Incorta Nexus. In one fully managed native system, I can ask questions on every transaction item in all of our operating systems, marry that with external unstructured data, thousands of pages, and get that context in 4 minutes, right? Get that context what it would have taken a team to get in maybe a week to then go to my board and go to Osama. But maybe one last question for Rob. What would this mean, having a fully managed solution on top of live detailed data and having external data for a finance team?
Well, so the beauty of something like this for me is, part of my job is I ask questions all day long. And, a question like that, depending on the level of detail you have in your day-to-day reporting, it might require me to just pull out a report that I already have that's canned, and I'm going to have my answer. But more times than not, it's going to require to get down to general ledger and maybe, transaction level information. In order to do that, it's, either I'm going to have to log into the general ledger, which when your CFO is in your GL, that's never a good idea, or you're going to have to go to the controller or some of the people in the finance organization to actually answer these questions on your behalf. So the self-service aspect of that is incredibly powerful. As far as the original question of what does it mean to a CFO? First of all, the privacy aspect of it is huge. I've been chomping at the bit to use generative AI in our everyday business applications. But, as typically the most risk-averse guy in the room, that's a little bit of a concerning concept of, having a model that could be exposed to the public. So that, for me, is, a really, really critical component to the equation of how we want to use generative AI in our business. But like I said, a CFO, you're constantly answering questions all day long. And, every CFO has gotten that Friday night call where your CEO calls you up and says, hey, I've been thinking about this question. Can you give me that answer? And oftentimes it can be a very simple question. And usually the simple questions are the ones that can be the most challenging for the accountants to answer because there's a level of complexity, especially when you're talking about, is it closed financial information? Is it intra-period? Are you talking about something that is spanning multiple general ledgers and ERPs? And then it becomes really, really troublesome when you're trying to marry, financial system information with something that is not a core financial system like CRM, or you're looking at like a customer 360, how you view your relations with your end customer, and you're marrying CRM and like Jira or like customer sat data. So in order to be able to have all of that information at hand and be able to query it and create ad hoc reporting and responses, like that's a huge time savings for any finance organization.
Yeah. And I love what you said, right, is if you don't have this pre-canned report, any ad hoc analysis, Incorta is truly the only company that can do ad hoc analysis on live detailed operational data at scale, right? So when I come out and now I know, our competitors' margin isn't decreasing, it looks like ours is, it's driven by COGS, even inside that, it's driven by our compensation, I can now get a report on our compensation. Was it too many merit increases or too many hires that weren't in our budget, right? These reports you never would have at a hand, but a CFO can simply ask the question and get them instantly. Thanks, that's it. And next we're gonna show you who powers our, along with Incorta, who else helps us power Incorta Nexus. So we're gonna have Explain and Vectara come to the stage and have Osama introduce them.
Thank you, thanks a lot. Yeah, but before that, I want our head of sales, Tom, We need to talk about all these increase in compensation, okay?
Done,
You
Osama.
need to dig deep and find, okay. So here we have Dr. Hassan Sawaf, the CEO of Explain. All the work that you have seen there, all these models being served, on Explain, actually with the demo that you have seen that we just recorded yesterday, and also from Vectara. Johnson also here, Justin?
Yeah, Justin.
Justin here. Amr, by the way, is actually in a flight and will be joining us later today. So we would love to hear from Dr. Hassan about Explain, how you guys started that. And I know that you have another session later on. Just give introduction about the company.
Thank you very much, Osama. Thank you for having me. Thanks for this great event. Yeah, I mean, Saul talked about something which is super important. I mean, things to be able to accelerate fast, building new experiences and experiment fast is a critical component in its most simple manner. And that's why basically we started Explain. We wanted to actually have people not to reinvent the wheel yet again, and basically be able to have access to all the technologies out there. And this is benefiting all of you. This is benefiting everyone, that we can actually in a rapid time experiment with multiple LLMs or other kind of AI capabilities. We have 40,000 different models on the platform. And we basically did that through an agent framework, which I'm going to talk about in my own session later on, but to enable us to not needing to think about the details about how to integrate, how to do things, how to optimize infrastructure and so forth. So this is us, and we are so happy to see what magic you guys build on top of it.
Thank
you so much.
Did you expect to see a Vectara demo? Right away, and how we are joining structured, unstructured data?
I will say that might have been the best Vectara demo I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
You guys, every time the question was asked about the competitor, that was hitting Vectara. But anyway, so the astute members of the audience will recognize that I'm probably not Amin. If you remember the picture from the start, he's a lot taller with more hair. He had something come up last minute. He'll be here later today. But I'm Justin. I run the customer organization here at Vectara. So I've been here about 2 years and talked, I counted it, over 300 customers about their Gen AI initiatives, which use cases they're rolling on, their strategies. And I wanted to share the customer perspective that really validates why this partnership is so important and this product is so powerful. So the things that I've heard from our customers, and this is like pre-ChatGPT, when most people still didn't know what Gen AI was or what an LLM was. It comes down to a couple key things. Security, right? Access controls, transparency, lineage, and now more and more hallucinations, bias, data leakage. All these things that Incorta has been good at for years. And Vectara has put a lot of emphasis around controlling for the new breed of trustworthiness that comes with Gen AI. We also hear, I want to be able to run anywhere, any cloud, on-premise. We're building that together. We also hear it needs to be easy. Like you saw how easy that was. Like I don't need to spin up a huge development project. Just get me my answers. Get me my virtual assistant to address my questions quickly and easily. Like Explain makes an amazing product to do like no-code AI pipelines, right? And the culmination of all this is really the nirvana state, which is people want this unstructured and structured data all together. Let me ask my questions however I want to ask it. If it comes from a database or some unstructured source, it doesn't matter. We've never had an answer when they've asked us for that. But with this Copilot that you just saw and the marriage together of all the structured data that Incorta works with and the unstructured that Vectara works with, the orchestration that Explain does, like we have an answer when people ask for that nirvana. So we have another session later on today. You'll hear more about Vectara, and we have a booth in the back. So thanks for your attention.
So thanks a lot. We cannot thank you enough. Nexus wouldn't be possible without the help from both of you. Thank you. And the innovation here. And we promise that we will continue to bring the latest and most advanced technology to your data, to your enterprise. And we would love to hear in the next user group, next NoLimits, how the Nexus is improving your business and able to accelerate your business as well. So with that, it is the promise that innovation, there are no limits for innovation. What we have seen today was not possible a month ago. I really, really mean it. So we really pushing to the limit, and we know that there is no limits. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Osama. Okay, we mentioned earlier today that we would have some of our Incortians, as we like to call them, coming up on the stage to talk a little bit about their own personal experience. So I'd like to welcome Eric Jackson, CFO of Petroleum Analyzer Company. Eric he is, of course, the CFO of Petroleum Analyzer Company since 2021. Eric has spent 15 years with HNI Corporation in senior leadership positions, including CFO of the HON company. He's also been president of HNI's K through 12 education group and has been a VP and GM of multiple business units. Please welcome Eric Jackson.
Oh, I'm good. We will need a clicker. Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for having me here. I'm from Houston, Texas. So with all the storms and the summer heat that's already there, it's a pleasure to be in San Francisco for a couple of days. Much different environment. So anyway, as it said, I'm Eric Jackson, Petroleum Analyzer Company. As the name would suggest, we analyze petroleum. So we're going to talk a little bit about our journey. We've been working with Incorta for a couple of years. It's been a fantastic experience, and the next gen stuff is even more exciting. So with that, who is PAC? Really fast. Get the squeaky floor. We're part of Indicor. Up until a couple of years ago, we were part of a publicly traded company, spun off to a private equity firm. So we're 15 companies that make up Indicor, primarily small manufacturing niche, really around compliance, regulation, safety, those kinds of areas of the business. In our particular case, PAC, we're really around compliance, safety. Again, we're talking about transportation fuels, primarily jet fuel, diesel, some of those customary things, which doesn't sound very exciting, doesn't sound very environmentally friendly until you start thinking about the safety aspect. So we're measuring the fuel in your jet fuel for safety, checking for sulfur content. Sulfur gets too high, bad things happen to the plane. So we're fairly important to your air travel. So safely, sustainably, that's really our mission in life. Where you can find us, we're primarily in the laboratory. These are instruments that are measuring fuels, petrochem, that kind of thing. Medical device, we test some things for leak, like leak testing on catheters or leak testing for continuous glucose monitoring, that kind of stuff. And with the whole change in the world towards sustainability, even those core transportation fuels are headed more towards sustainability. So how do we get basically sustainable aviation fuels? For example, we're helping the world's leading companies figure that equation out, how to be sustainable while remaining safe. So that's a little bit about PAC. But now let's talk about our journey with Incorta. It's been awesome. It's the same problem, nothing special. It's every CFO's nightmare, spreadsheet hell. Those aren't my numbers. Those aren't accurate. Difficulty getting information. It's all of the same problems that we've had. It's very slow. So that's the problem I walked into 3 years ago with PAC. Our background is one of a bunch of acquisitions. So we run 7 manufacturing sites around the globe. Most of our business is outside of the US. And so there was with the acquisitions, what really happened was they all went to the same ERP system, which just happens to be IFS. They went on the same ERP system, but we didn't force them to go to a common chart of accounts or to common commodity codes or common suppliers or anything. And so you basically had 7 or 8 different ERP systems. So When I walked in, that was the issue. We basically have an ERP system that's fine as a system of record, but it's not fine for reporting, analyzing, asking the questions that Rob was just asking. So there was a fork in the road. We were looking at what are the options. Obviously, re-implementing an ERP is everyone's dream. We were just about to be spun off, and the last thing we wanted to do was really tell the PE firm, great news. Our biggest initiative is a ERP re-implementation. So that one was kind of put off to the side. There was a contingent inside of the company that wanted to double down on the data warehouse, ETL, aggregated data. But I went to my friend Lisa. We work with eCapital Advisors. They're here today as a sponsor. Asked her if there was anything new. We'd worked together for years. And she introduced me to Incorta, and I guess the rest they say is the good history there. So here's some proof points of what we've done. A lot of it's really simple. It's stuff that you're like, yeah, everybody does that. But at least for us, it's been a game changer, and I'll say it several times. It's really about having the transaction level detail. It's not the aggregated detail, right? You can get your hands on the numbers in detail, and that's the game changer for us. That's the secret sauce as we see it for Incorta. So some of the things we did, the first one, we wanted to take a problem that hadn't been solved before using the tools that we had. We did that because we wanted, with that resistance, the internal change management, we didn't want to just go replicate something we already had. We wanted to pick on something that wasn't solved, let people see the power of the tool. And so we tested Incorta with this one, which is essentially just an end-to-end customer profitability sort of analysis. The GORPy part of this is getting rid of the transfer price impact between sites and trying to find the true manufacturing cost, the sale price, marrying those together. And so today we can measure all the way down to if a refinery has multiple sites, we can see profitability of to the site level. So not just customer, but inside the customer, down to the product level, things that we never were able to see before. And it just opened our eyes again with that, getting the hands on the detailed data allowed us to ask different questions. And being acquired by PE, I tell my team our motto should be twice as much in half the time, right? The questions are different every day. We're being asked to do more and more and more. And so tools like this are allowing us to answer those questions, not as fast as the Gen AI, we'll get there, but at least answering those questions that are coming up. So great breakthrough. First test was commercial profitability. At that point, the commercial team was really on board. They were followers. We did some other simple things. We dumped the AR detail in, of course. We hadn't done that before. It was all sitting in the ledgers. Sounds so simple, but just getting visibility. Remember, we had 7 or 8 different ledgers running. So a customer would have data in one site. They may be on time with payments in one site, and that same customer over here is behind, and we're running spreadsheets trying to marry that up. Now we just have one view of the customer. We took our DSO down by 20%. It's crazy how much, not just because of Incorta, but with the transparency of data and a few more programs that we put in place with this new insight, amazing results with that. So just really simple, but so effective. Spend analytics, I think everybody has done spend analytics. It's been very helpful the last couple of years with material inflation and those kinds of things. It's always fun to see that you're buying the same part from the same supplier in 2 different locations at 2 different prices, right? But until you get that data, right? And no one would believe you before, and it was always aggregated detail or aggregated data. Now it's detail, and the people are like, that's not true. And you can show them the PO number, right? You can show them who cut the purchase order. So great stuff, simple, but great. This one here, a lot of manual reporting. So across the globe, we close our books in 3 days in the sites, 4 days at corporate. So it used to take this antiquated data dump into Excel. It would churn literally for 20 hours at the end of the month to get the month-end close process started. And if you're in Europe or if you're in Asia, your day's over, right? So you're on a 3-day close and you've just lost your first day. We automated it, took about half the time out. Now it's, way more accurate, much, much quicker. And it's just a game changer, and people then can get to the analytics, far faster on the month-end close. So again, very, very simple, but just super having that detailed data at your fingertips. Of course, we did executive dashboards, comparisons to plan prior, et cetera. But the real story, I think, for us has been the operations impact. So the operations group, I'm talking about supply chain, manufacturing, those guys, they were probably the biggest, they were the most opposed to change. They liked what they had. It was working fine for them. It was all okay. So they were resistant to change, but we got them on board. We reprogrammed everything. We got the data. And with that detailed data level, they're now our biggest disciples. They literally are at the top of the mountain shouting how much they love the capability, asking for new stuff every single day. And we're seeing it on the on-time delivery. We're seeing the impact in inventory. We're seeing all of the impact from having that detail at their fingertips. So really a great success story on operations. What's next? Well, if it stopped there, it would still be a good story. We got a few more things going. We have some modules like service, some quality of inventory, some automating of other manual stuff like sales incentive tracking. But the two that are on here that are the most exciting for me is the price analytics, okay? Price analytics, and the predictive top line, demand forecasting, basically. And so those, because we have the detail, we can go far, far more in depth. And you can imagine then how this dovetails in with the stuff we're talking about with the Gen AI, right? So now it would have taken our analysts and our product managers months to do some of the conjoint regression, some of those models with this data. Even if we just had the data, it would take them months. And so now we're looking forward to starting down this journey to where we can automate some of that as well. So really pleased with the tool. It's been a real breakthrough for us. I told Lisa I've been looking for this tool for 25 years. Anyway, thanks for having me. That's our success story, and we're happy to be part of this journey.
Thank you, Eric. We really appreciate you. We are going to take a short break. We will be ringing the chimes. Those chimes aren't in your head. We are actually ringing those. So that's how you'll know that we're going to be coming back. And when we come back, we'll have Dr. Arsenjani from Google. So looking forward to seeing you in a few minutes.